Australia is the sixth largest country in the world and home to over 27 million people. Yet, most Australians live near the coast, concentrated in cities like Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane, Perth, and Adelaide. That means the vast interior of the continent is mostly empty, dominated by some of the largest and driest deserts on Earth. The Great Victoria, Great Sandy, Simpson, Gibson, and Tanami are among the largest. But there are also smaller ones like Little Sandy, Strzelecki, Sturt Stony, Tirari, and Padirka deserts. In total, Australia's deserts cover over 1.3 million square kilometers, a land larger than South Africa and nearly twice the size of France. What makes them especially interesting is their solar potential. These deserts receive some of the highest levels of solar radiation on the planet, often between 4 to 6 kilowatt hours per square meter per day. Which brings us to the big question. What if we covered these deserts with solar panels? To answer that, we first need to understand just how much energy Australia could realistically produce. Australia's vast deserts receives an extraordinary amount of sunlight year-round. In terms of solar irradiance, the measure of how much solar power is received per square meter, many parts of Central Australia average more than 2,000 kilowatt hours per square meter annually. That's among the highest levels anywhere on Earth, comparable to the Sahara, the Arabian deserts, or the American Southwest. Take the Great Victoria Desert, for example, a massive expanse of land covering about 349,000 square kilometers. If we cover just this area with standard solar panels operating at a typical 15% efficiency, they would generate 150 to 200 watts per square meter during peak sunlight hours. Across just 1 square kilometer, that would result in 150 to 200 megawatts of peak electricity generation. Over the course of a single day, that's enough energy to power around 40,000 to 50,000 homes. Now, imagine scaling that up. If we cover just 1% of Australia's desert regions, roughly 13,710 square kilometers, with solar panels, the potential output could exceed 4,000 to 5,000 terawatt hours per year. For context, that's more than 15 times Australia's current electricity consumption, which is around 273 terawatt hours. And on a global scale, that's nearly 1/6 of the world's total annual electricity demand, estimated at 29,471 terawatt hours. Now, while generating massive amounts of solar power in the desert sounds promising, the real question is how we get that energy to the people who need it. Take a look at this map of Australia's electricity grid. You'll immediately notice a key feature. The high voltage transmission lines are concentrated along the coast, especially in the southeast near major cities like Sydney, Melbourne, and Brisbane. However, the best locations for solar energy, such as the Gibson and Simpson deserts, are situated thousands of kilometers away from these urban centers. This creates a significant logistical hurdle. To transport electricity from the central deserts to the coast, we need to construct an expansive network of high-voltage DC lines. These lines are much more expensive than traditional AC lines, especially when covering vast distances. For instance, building just 1 kilometer of high-voltage DC line can cost anywhere between $1 million to $2 million US. So when you're looking at connecting solar farms 2,000 kilometers from the nearest city, the cost skyrockets, easily running into billions of dollars just to move the electricity. But it doesn't end there. The construction of this infrastructure presents additional challenges. Now, take a look at this second map, Australia's national road network. Notice how few major roads actually cut through the center of the country. Outside the coastal cities, the road density drops off dramatically. In the heart of the outback, you are often left with a handful of dirt tracks or long stretches of unpaved highways. This makes access a nightmare. Transporting workers, heavy machinery, and building materials to these remote solar farm sites would be extremely difficult, slow, and expensive. And if something breaks, the closest help might be hundreds of kilometers or even days away. But the challenges don't stop with construction and maintenance. There's also the issue of preserving the environment and the delicate balance of life in these regions. Australia's deserts might look empty, but they aren't. A closer look at the biome maps of Central Australia reveals that much of this land is classified as arid shrubland and desert grassland, ecosystems that support hundreds of uniquely adapted species. Some of these creatures, like the great desert skink and the mulgara, exist nowhere else on the planet. Developing massive solar farms here wouldn't just involve placing panels. It would mean clearing and leveling huge swaths of terrain, cutting through sensitive habitats, and potentially altering water drainage systems that have remained undisturbed for millennia. But beyond environmental concerns, there's another crucial factor that can't be overlooked: Indigenous land rights. Large portions of the outback fall within traditional Aboriginal territories, such as the Anangu Pijajantara Yakutanjajara lands in South Australia, or the Martu lands in Western Australia, and the Warlpiri territory in Northern Territory. Attempting to build major energy infrastructure on these lands without proper consultation or consent could spark major legal battles and cause lasting cultural harm. Of course, there are ways to reduce the impact, like spacing solar panels to let light reach the ground, preserving wildlife corridors, and involving indigenous communities in planning and revenue sharing. But none of this is easy. It requires long-term planning, deep cooperation, and coordination across governments, industries, and communities on a national scale. And even if that were all possible, Australia would still face a major problem: producing far more solar energy than it could use domestically. If Australia can't consume all the solar power it's capable of generating, exporting it becomes the next frontier. But how do you export electricity across oceans? One idea is surprisingly direct: undersea power cables. Take the Sun Cable project. It aimed to transmit solar power from Australia's Northern Territory to Singapore using high voltage cable running more than 4,300 kilometers under the Timor Sea. If successful, it would have been the longest submarine power cable ever built. This kind of connection could turn Australia into a power hub for Southeast Asia, supplying electricity to countries like Indonesia, Vietnam, and beyond. But it wouldn't come cheap. The Sun Cable project alone was estimated to cost $24 billion before it was paused in 2023. There are also serious risks. Undersea cables are vulnerable to earthquakes, tsunamis, and ship damage. One break in the line could cut off power to millions, making backups and repairs both critical and costly. An alternative: don't export electricity, export hydrogen. Australia could use its solar energy to power hydrogen hubs in places like Port Hedland and Gladstone. These facilities would produce green hydrogen through electrolysis, then liquefy it and ship it to countries like Japan, South Korea, and Germany, nations already investing in hydrogen technology. This approach is far more flexible than undersea cables and avoids the need for international transmission lines. But it's also inefficient. Electrolysis wastes energy, and turning hydrogen into liquid form takes even more. By the time it reaches its destination, a significant portion of the original solar power is lost. Still, if scaled up, it could create an entirely new global energy market, one where remote deserts fuel the world's clean energy future. Covering Australia's deserts with solar panels is possible but not easy. On paper, the numbers are incredible. Enough clean energy to power the entire country many times over with plenty to export, but in reality it would take massive funding, smart planning, and respect for local communities and the environment. I hope you learned something new today. If you did, make sure to like the video and subscribe for more videos just like this one.